Good morning. Boker Tov. Good morning. Or if you're from the South, you just say broken toe and they'll nod, act like you're speaking Hebrew. So it's close enough. How many of you were not here yesterday? Oh, wow, you got some fresh faces, Colonel. All right, well, we're delighted to welcome back a friend of many years. You know, there's a lot of things said about Israel in the media. They're shooting children, they're starving children, and the news is very difficult to interpret. But one of the safeguards for me is there are Israelis I know, Ronny and his bride being one family, but they're not the only ones, and they're men and women of integrity and character, and if Israelis were doing that, I would know it from them. I can tell you this about Ronny. After the October 7th attack, you couldn't have kept Ronny inside the house, but he has too much wisdom and experience to serve in the military any longer. But he would get up each day and drive down to the area near where the attacks took place and harvest vegetables in the fields to be active. And I know the character of too many people there for some of the reports that have been made to be accurate. And it's just a time where we have to be aware and alert, and I commend you for making an investment of time to come to a seminar like this, because truth is a very powerful thing. And your exposure to the facts enabled you to arrive at a conclusion for yourself, which is a very helpful tool. And I'm most grateful to have a friend that would travel 7,000 miles and take 4 days to help you do that, because it's a significant investment of time and energy on his part. So if this is your first time to meet Ronny Simon, I think you will, it's like taking a drink from a fire hydrant. You'll get a drink and you're going to get really wet. I used to introduce him as a hitman from the Mossad, and he told me I can't do that anymore, so I won't tell you that that's what he does, but it's because that wasn't true. No, we have known him as a tour guide, as a friend. I have known his family, his children, and it's an honor to welcome him back to Middle Tennessee. So help me welcome Ronny Simon.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for coming back. You always wonder how many people are going to show up the following day. So I take that as an encouragement to see so many people. If you were not here yesterday, well, you missed part of it. I'm not going to repeat all the introduction I gave yesterday. So yesterday will not be in the final exam, but today and on will be. And since we try to advance chronologically, to go from one turning point to the other, we have to skip what we shared yesterday for those of you that came today for the first time and just carry on. I do like to encourage all of you. Do not trust on what you hear from me. I said it yesterday as well. As much as I try to be objective, I cannot be totally objective. I'm part of the conflict. I'm an Israeli and proud to be. I'm Jewish and proud to be. And therefore, to be totally objective will be an impossibility for me. On the other hand, I'll try very much not to go into propaganda. There is so much of that out there. I don't want to add to any of it. And there's so much deception and disinformation and fake news, etc., because as I said yesterday, we live in the world of narratives, and there is a certain narrative, and narrative is many things, but not the facts and not the truth. So we're dedicating 4 sessions, 2 hours each, to try to cover the historical facts behind the Israeli-Palestinian/Arab conflict. And as I said yesterday, there was more than that. It's not just a limited geographical place to the Middle East. We speak about the global conflict. The focus is on religion. We speak about jihad that the Muslim world had proclaimed officially more than once against all the infidels. And that will include you, that will include me. And for many years, we tried to ignore that because we thought the issue is political. We speak about a national conflict. Those nations over there should somehow find a solution. We are not really part of it. I think it's very much on the table. It was about religion. It is about religion. It will be about religion. And once you come to that level, it can be discouraging because religious wars don't have a happy ending. It's never a peaceful negotiation. It's never an agreement, not in history, unfortunately, not in this case as well. And as I shared yesterday, we can speak about the past and we can try to convince each other, educate each other. That's not the main thing. The question should be, how do we see the future? And based on what we see in the past, the future in the Middle East is not going to be one of peace. It's going to be an ongoing struggle. You can't help it because it's not changing the mindset of the people in Gaza and try to convince them that peace is good for them. You're dealing with a religion. You know, when Nazi Germany was defeated, the Germans understood the Nazi adventure wasn't good for the Germans, basically, and therefore many of them understood that and created a new Germany. We still have Nazis in Germany and all around the world, but the German nation as a nation understood that we should go back to a normal course of life, and the Nazi adventure wasn't good for Germany. Is it possible that the Palestinians will come to the same conclusion? That world jihad didn't help us much, it brought so much suffering, let's try the track of peace. Is it even possible? No, it's not, because you deal with religion and not with a political conviction, and therefore we try to anticipate the future based on what we know from the past, and it's hard to be an optimist when it comes to a peaceful solution. And therefore we speak about violence, unfortunately. It looks like we will live on by the sword for many years to come. At least we have no illusions anymore that peace may prevail in the Middle East, because we lived under that impression for a long time. And we gave a plan, and we gave a property and influence, hoping it will lead to peace. There wasn't the intention. Now we know it requires a whole new way of thinking. How do we see the future in the Middle East and what are the possibilities? So this is another short introduction, if I may. You know the logistics. We are going to go until about 9:50 or so. We'll be dismissed for 10 minutes. There is a resources table outside if you want to go and check it out, books and all kind of DVD series of videos. Please go and check it out, and you're most welcome, of course, to make those purchases if you're interested in what I'm sharing with you. I think that what you'll find over there will be also of interest, although it's not directly speaking about modern days in the Middle East. Yesterday, I tried to convince you, and I did that by using all kind of documents about Palestine, how the land looked like under the Ottoman Empire, who were the people who lived in Palestine, what about this prosperous, peaceful nation that used to live there before the barbarian Jews came over to steal the land from the locals. We spoke about the indigenous people of the land. We spoke about the change in demographics. We spoke about Palestine in the days of the Ottoman Empire. And we brought that to conclusion, speaking about the First World War and the outcomes of the First World War. Not going to repeat all of it, but I do have to repeat at least some of it. And yesterday we ended with this, to remind you. We spoke about the British policy during WW1. Great Britain was in need of allies. They wanted to carry on the war against the Germans on French soil. They thought that Turkey, the Ottomans, are the weakest link, and they need to attack Turkey as well. They looked for allies in the region, and they found the local Arabs in the Middle East under the leadership of the Sharif of Mecca as a potential ally. They made him an offer. If you help us during the war, we're going to make a big kingdom for the Arabs that will cover the whole of the Middle East. Now, some of you, please say, yes, we remember. Or, oh, thank you, because you just look at me as if you heard it for the first time. I did speak about it yesterday. And then we spoke about the two politicians, the British and the French one, that negotiated over dividing the Middle East between the two superpowers after the war will be over. That was called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And the same land that was offered to the king of the Arabs as a kingdom was also offered to friends. One did not know about the promise made to the other. And when it will surface, that will lead to much chaos in world diplomacy right after WW1. And then the Jews are getting also a promise at the same time, given by the King of England, King of Great Britain, George V, that the British Empire is seeing in favor and will help to facilitate a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. As I did mention yesterday, the only legal document that the world respected, which is still on the table, is this one, when we speak about who the land belongs to. Because this document was adopted by the League of Nations. It was part of the mandate given to Britain over Palestine. And ever since, no new document was ever written that speaks about the land belongs to somebody else. So this is still on the table, although, as we speak, in New York, the United Nations gets together and many countries recognize a Palestinian state, which is meaningless except for the declaration. It means absolutely nothing. But as for now, no, practically, as for now, that's a document, all right? Who owns the land and who has rights in the land. And when the war came to an end, you do understand the chaos, you do understand confusion, because the main question was, the Jews will have a homeland in Palestine. What is Palestine? It wasn't clear to anybody what will be the sizes of Palestine, because such a country never existed in the past. When the Roman Emperor Adrian named the area Palestine, it was a small area around Jerusalem, the land of Judea. And then this term was so flexible that everybody used the term Palestine, but there were no clear borders. When we look at British maps, their idea of Palestine would be this area. So keep in mind that by the British idea, this is the land allocated for the Jewish people to build a homeland. To make it more confusing, it doesn't say how much of Palestine. It spoke about the homeland in Palestine. You don't understand the careful language here. How much of Palestine? It doesn't say. So we don't know what is Palestine, how much of it will be allocated for the Jewish national home, and what is a national home. Is it an independent state? Is it a kingdom? Is it an autonomy? Not very clear. But the war ends, and that will be now the biggest question. And thank you, people from the staff that gave me this excellent, look at this, huh? Laser pointer. Hey, I'm telling you, the 21st century is great. So I'm going to use that. But even later on, when the argument was there, that it wasn't all of Palestine, it was just the area on the western side of the Jordan River, Balfour himself made that quote, and you understand what was Palestine for the British idea and what was the land the British were allocating for the Jews. So Balfour himself said, I hope that this is a little piece of land, right? All of this, Palestine, okay, which is given to the Jews, will not bring up too much resentment from the Arabs who get a vast territory. All of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon of today. These countries did not exist. So that was the mindset of Britain by giving the declaration and tried to explain what do they mean. After the war was over, there was a major confusion. The world gets together to a peace conference in Paris, and that peace conference is revealing basically all the treaties that Great Britain did, and you begin to understand the conflict between those promises to the Arabs and to the others, but we do need to speak about some basic principles. The Ottoman Empire was defeated. It wasn't the Ottoman Empire, it was the Muslim faith. The way they teach history in Arab schools until this very day, that the outcomes of the wars where Christianity won the war against Islam, and just like in the days of the Crusaders, it will be temporary. We are committed to restore the greatness of Islam. It's a war of religion. In that stage, the Muslim world is until this very day. Because ever since, Islam is being defeated, either by the Jewish state, how shameful for them, or by Christian powers, etc. That's how they see the outcomes of WW1. So please keep in mind that little issue that we always ignore, which is the main issue. is how the other side reads history and how do they understand what we do, because we don't think the same way and we don't act the same way. So now we have a new situation which makes it a little more complicated, because the victors of the First World War, Britain, France, just for matters of convenience, wanted to create the Middle East that will be divided to countries and nations just like Europe. It will be easier to control. Was anybody asking the locals, would you like to be a nation? The concept was not known yet in the region. Since biblical days, people live in tribes, people live in clans. The clan that lives on the next mountain is not my friend and not part of my nation. We share absolutely nothing. We fight for grazing grounds. We fight for water sources. We have nothing in common. And suddenly, the victors of the war, Christians to remind you, are going to create countries and states and nations and nationalities. We do not understand the concept, but nobody was asking the locals. And therefore, the Middle East basically was created by the victors of the war, trying to build an area after their own image in Europe to create nationalities for people that did not want to be part of a nation, did not want to live such a way of life. By the way, if you decide that this area is going to be a nation, how do you convince the tribes to cooperate? What will they have in common? Is it going to be a democracy so they can vote for a local parliament, which they never had? They do not understand the idea of elections. Most likely, each tribe will vote for something that they're interested in. There is no national sentiment. And therefore, these countries can only operate under one condition. It's either a monarchy and you obey the king, or maybe a dictatorship, you fear the ruler. And that's why you are cooperating with all the others. Folks, it's not easy to create a nation and create a national sentiment when people have nothing in common except for language and maybe religion. So the Middle East is facing now a new situation. Remember the drill from yesterday when I reached for the Kleenex box? What do you do? All right, number one for today, plug your ears. I'm sorry, this is embarrassing. We'll see how it will happen tomorrow. Thank you for helping me with the muting the whole thing. So we do speak about something completely new in the region that the locals are going to confront somehow, because when you speak about Muslim nations, that's an oxymoron. Islam does not believe in nationalities. Islam believes in Ummat al-Islam, which means all the Muslims, one entity under the Sultan, under the Caliph. That's what ISIS tried to accomplish. That was the Ottoman Empire all about. When you divide them to nations, it's a conspiracy. You want to weaken them. It's a Christian conspiracy how to control the Muslim faith by dividing them to nations. The nation of Iraq was created by Christians. The nation of Jordan was the outcome of British policy. These nations did not exist. So when you understand how the Middle East was made, you begin to understand also the frustration of the locals. Today, more than a century later, people did create some national identity. Today, the Jordanians are proud to be Jordanians, and the Syrians are Syrians, and the Iraqis are Iraqis. But that's less than half a century old. It took some time to create that kind of a national sentiment. And what will be the glue, the common denominator? In many cases, the army. The army is the one which is the melting pot, because you invite everybody in. The army serves the dictatorship. That's one way to control people that got together to become a nation against their will. So that's the Middle East, and that will be the sentiment even today. So once again, let me ask you, because we started with this slide yesterday, if you live in a place called Baghdad, and you ask the local, sir or ma'am, how do you define yourself? After the war was over, he will have to say, I am Iraqi national. If you ask him, what does it mean? He will say, I don't have a clue. Somebody told me that I am an Iraqi national. I'm a Muslim, I'm an Arab, and now I have a nationality. Aren't you happy? Well, you need to understand, what does it mean? And back then, it meant absolutely nothing. And please pay attention, I said nothing so far about Palestinians, Palestine, nation. This will take some decades to develop. Same thing in Jerusalem. Now, if you ask a local, he will say that I live in Palestine, but Palestine is an area that the British Empire is controlling. So Palestine did not have a nation yet. That will only happen later on. So we're going back to square one, so to speak. I know this is confusing to watch, but it's important. That was the implementation of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. That will be the French mandate divided to Lebanon, Syria. That will be the British one. Mesopotamia will be called Iraq later on. The name was given later on. There will be some independent entities. That's Iran. The country of Iran, still known by the name Persia. You know who named Iran Iran? In 1935, Adolf Hitler. All right, Aryans, Iranians, sounds familiar? All right, the Nazi philosophy connected the roots of the Iran philosophy to King Cyrus the great conqueror, Iranian. Persia was the name until 1935, and you have the independent Arab kingdom, Saudi Arabia. All these were the outcomes of the war. Before the war was over, these countries did not exist. So the world goes to a peace conference in Paris, France. The Jewish delegation representing the Zionist movement is all anticipating world recognition because of the promise gave by Britain. The Arabs don't have a delegation except for the Sharif of Mecca. But you should say, what about the Palestinian delegation? There is no such thing, all right, at least not yet. And it took about a year or so to try to deal with issues. You see the figures over there, Woodrow Wilson on the right-hand side, Clemenceau from France, Lloyd George on the left, and the Italian Prime Minister, forgot his name. And they create a body that will be called the League of Nations. It was Wilson's vision, and in a very, we have to say, naive way. The idea was that we had enough with the secret diplomacy. What Great Britain did, signing agreements secretly, leads to chaos. We want to have full transparency. Everything is on the table, and we are going to create nation states. Every nation will have a right for self-determination. Austro-Hungary, the big empire, crumbled after the war, they no longer exist. And on the ruins of Austro-Hungary, 11 states were created. The Czech Republic, the Slovaks, part of Poland. We speak about Yugoslavia. All these nations did not exist before the aftermath of WW1. So the Zionist movement is all excited. The world promises a state. We'll present our plan. The Arab delegation representing the Sharif of Mecca, but not the Palestinians. They were not represented in any way. And they start negotiations, and that would be quite unusual. Well, since the British had boots on the ground in Palestine, they lost 17,000 soldiers on the campaign over Palestine and Mesopotamia. They were simply there to tell the UN or the League of Nations, listen, if we are going to implement the mandatory system, since we are here, give it to us. We can be the power that will create the mandate, or that will have the mandate for the locals in Palestine. Let's see if I can go one back. Because the idea was this: since we are going to conquer the whole area in the Middle East, we're going to teach the locals, prepare them to be a nation. They don't have a clue how to do that. What an arrogant approach to come with. You do understand that. We are going to teach them. These are tribes, these are nomads. We want to create countries. It has to be a mandate given to a superpower to simply educate the locals. How a state looks like, what does the term nation mean, because they don't have a clue. So that was the idea. France will have a mandate over areas that will produce Syria and Lebanon. They did not exist yet. Britain will have a mandate over Palestine and what will be Iraq later on. And the whole idea was, it's temporary. For the time being, we're going to teach the locals. Who did they want to teach? The Jews in Palestine have institutions already. The plan is definitely national. So the mandate was given more to the Arab tribes in the Middle East than to the Jews. And since Britain was there, Britain said, well, since we are here, it's only natural that we will have the mandate over Palestine. It took a long time to understand the real intention of Great Britain. And that intention was not in favor of the Jews and not to fulfill the Balfour Declaration. They had totally different plans, and as I proved to you when we're going to look into some documents. But for 30 years, there will be a mandate over Palestine given to Great Britain. We are in the era between the two world wars. Keep in mind that soon after number one was over, it looked like another conflict is going to take place. And who was the ally of the British in the First World War? The Arabs, to remind you. Which means you receive a mandate from the world to help the Jews build a homeland, but practically you want the Arabs on your side because they helped you during WW1. That will typify the whole British diplomacy. I have to say that the problems that we have in the region today, we can easily point a finger to say it's Britain and France and their mentality, politics 100 years ago that created all the issues that we face today in the Middle East. They did not anticipate what may happen, but basically they are. I will go as far as to say that some of the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust, Britain is to be blamed. Because when it was clear that Adolf Hitler is going to exterminate the Jewish population, people wanted to go to Palestine, to go back home. Great Britain had to seal the borders, not to take a single Jewish refugee. They were trapped in Europe and were sent to the gas chambers. Great Britain should be responsible for at least part of it. It wasn't their intention. They did not want to exterminate the Jews, but they did nothing to help them to fulfill the mandate. The mandate was given to them with one condition: help the Jews build a homeland in Palestine. So for 30 years, and just to remind you, that was the Sykes-Picot Agreement. You don't see any countries. Zone A will be French, Zone B will be Britain, and all the others. And if you zoom in into Palestine, that was supposed to be the separation to areas. The Zionist organization is going to the conference in Paris, and they present the plan. We don't want all of Palestine, all right, as Britain called it. We do want just that portion of the land. That is our demand, and this is our request to build a Jewish homeland in this area. It's important because the River Jordan feeds from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea, and that will be the border later on. And we said, listen, we want some of the hills on the other side. What was the purpose? That's biblical Israel. 2.5 tribes back in the days of the Bible, Reuben, Gad, half of Manasseh, occupied those mountains on the other side. And since after so many years in exile, we're coming back, we want to rebuild the land of Israel as it was in biblical days. So that was the plan, that was the request. And the League of Nations is holding a lot of sessions to see what can be done. And meanwhile, leaders are meeting. For example, Chaim Weizmann, one of the prominent Jewish leaders, meets with the son of the Sharif of Mecca. By the way, Prince Faisal was promised by the British to be the king of Damascus and Syria. But who got Syria eventually? The French, right? You do understand that this prince will feel so betrayed. Think about how his face looked like when he heard for the first time in the peace conference that his kingdom was basically not his. It was promised to France. In much haste, he had to go home to Damascus to try to protect his territory from the French army. He lost the war and he had to flee. And the British built a kingdom specially for him, Iraq. The country of Iraq was created as a kingdom for Prince Faisal that was promised to be the king of Syria. The French took it. It was theirs as well by the agreement with Great Britain. Iraq was born. Iraq was born to compensate the bitterness and the anger of an Arab prince because Great Britain had to keep the Arabs on their side. We speak about the numbers. We speak about oil fields in Iraq. They just started using those. The Middle East becomes a strategic issue because of petrol, as you understand. And Britain was the first one to see the potential. So Great Britain has no interest to fulfill Balfour Declaration. They will take the Arab side, and to compensate this young man, they created a kingdom for him. That will be the kingdom of Iraq. But you do see that there was some hope that maybe it's going to work. Faisal represents the Arab world. They're very happy to see the Jews coming back home. We can work together. This never materialized. But at least it shows you that there was some room to try to proceed peacefully and not violently. But the peace conference basically is going to turn everything upside down. You do see the book over there. That will be the mandate given to Great Britain, just some of the key events. First, you have the conference, and then there is another one that's going to work the details, how this is going to be. And years go by. Things happen in Palestine already. Talk about it in just a minute. We just spoke about Prince Faisal and the fact that he lost his own capital to the French. And for that reason, he had to go to Iraq. And meanwhile, Great Britain, before the mandate officially begins, understand their mistake. We will not be able to please all of our allies. We need to do something because the Sharif of Mecca has 2 sons. Each one was hoping to be a king. Faisal was thrown out from Damascus. He has a son called Abdullah. What can we do to compensate him? Winston Churchill was colonial secretary, and this is King Abdullah, or Prince Abdullah. And they write a document that will be called the White Paper. And the White Paper basically is remarking the borders of Palestine. Number one, it says there will be a quota of how many Jews are permitted to come back to Palestine. That's not the Balfour Declaration. A quota was violation number 1 of the British when they received the mandate. To make it even worse in a way, they remarked the borders. Mr. Churchill, in his hotel room in Cairo, opens the map, marks a line, and 75% of the proposed Jewish homeland are simply taken by the British. And now Palestine is this. And all of this is given to Prince Abdullah to create a new kingdom, the Hashemite kingdom of Transjordan, because this man demands what Great Britain promised. You betrayed my brother, he says. The French kicked him out of Damascus. If you want to have quiet, you better keep your promise to me. And Great Britain understands the problem. They simply divide Palestine into 2. 75% is taken. That will be now the territory of the Hashemite kingdom of Transjordan. So from that point on, speaking about Palestine, it leaves a very small piece of land. That will be Palestine from now on. This will be called, under the new name, the Kingdom of Jordan, or the Hashemite Kingdom of Transjordan. Do you understand the geography here? First, you offer a big land, and then you take 75%. All right? And also they said that Jews will not be permitted to buy any land east to the Jordan, which means the Jewish capital purchased land here as well. This land was gone with no compensation. So next, you want to purchase some land, said Britain to the Zionist organization. It has to be in Western Palestine. You cannot purchase land, you cannot reside, you cannot have any presence in the eastern part of the River Jordan. By the way, it said nothing about infiltration of Arabs from the eastern part to the western part. That was kosher, if I can say kosher in those circumstances. That was legit. So begin to see the biasness of the British. Even before the mandate was officially given to them, understanding we created a mess. And if you want to maintain our position as a reliable power to draw the Arabs on our side in a future conflict, that's what we need to do. We need to compensate them. Who paid the price? In a way, the Zionist movement. The Jewish homeland is shrinking now 75% in what it was supposed to be when the Balfour Declaration was made. So now we have a new situation. Whenever the British had a change of policy, they write what is called a white paper. And here you see the book of the mandate over Palestine. And it says very clearly, what's the intention? This was new. But Churchill published his document before this one was written. All right, this is July. And Churchill's document published a month earlier. So when the mandate officially was given to the British, it included the new borders of Palestine. So the mandate speaks about a small part, speaks about the western area, and please read Article 6. That's what the world agreed upon. All right, it's a quote from the document. It's very clear who the land belongs to. It's very clear what is Britain's obligation. Obligation is to help the Jews. How come the local Arabs are not even mentioned? You don't see any reference made over there about Palestinians, about another nation. If you don't think of yourself as a nation, why do you want anybody to give you such recognition? Tribes, clans, families, always in struggle. So this is what the world decided basically, Article number 6. Great Britain is going to help the Jews. It speaks about free immigration, something the Churchill's document is contradicting. It speaks about helping the Jews to build a homeland without discriminating ethnic groups that reside in Palestine. That will be the document. And again, the Jews had every reason to believe it's going to work. Even the USFA sent a committee over to check and see, is this the right thing to do? What's interesting is that they say that the Jews are invited to return, which means they used to be here once upon a time. They were expelled by the Romans. We invite them to return to their homeland, not to conquer a new land, not to carve out a new piece of property someplace. So the world is clear in recognizing who has rights for nationality in the land of Palestine, and this will be the American document that in a way complemented Article 6 that we just read. I have to say that the problems in Palestine did not wait. Once the locals, the Arabs, understood that the world is supporting a Jewish state, the riots started immediately. But the question is, why the locals had a problem with the existence of a Jewish state in Palestine? They were not losing any land. Life was better because the Jews brought prosperity with them. What would be the main reason? Well, I touched on that yesterday. Jews in Muslim countries are treated like second-class citizens. Dini, that's your position. Don't you dare to be equal to us, let alone to be above us. The problem of the Arabs in Palestine, not Palestinians yet, is the fact that the Jews are going to come home victorious, which is contradicting everything Islam teaches. So if you want to create an opposition in Palestine to the Jewish presence, you cannot do that claiming that you represent a nation. There was no nation. You have to do that in behalf of religion. So the way that the local leadership tried to get the locals together to go to fight the British mandate and to fight the promise of the Jews is to focus on the Muslim religion and not on the Palestinian nationality. So now we speak about religious issues. And which is the holiest place to Islam in Israel, Palestine? Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And this will be the focal point to all the uprisings and all the unrest. Keep in mind, the mandate is in the making. It wasn't even proclaimed yet. But after the Paris conference was dealing with it, the Arabs in Palestine decided to rebel, to confront that, not because of national issues, because of the Muslim issue, and dhimmis will never rule over Muslims. The man to lead that struggle was a man by the name of Hajj Amin al-Husseini. We're going to speak about him because he was the man behind all those disturbances in Palestine. From a certain point, it was Nazi money that sponsored all those uprisings against the British. But that will be in a later stage. Since British policy was in a way contradicting what the mandate said, it's a warning given by the colonial secretary of Great Britain addressing the House of Lords. It's almost like saying, I know what you mean. You mean to violate the letter of the mandate because you take the Arab side. The world is watching. That's our obligation. And you cannot change anything in the letter of the mandate. So this was like a warning given to the House of Lords, all right? That the world is watching, and we have to be very careful in what way we are going to keep that. I have to say that from day one, the mandatory authorities were not that favoring the Jews. Please read that statement, and I have some others as well, to show you what was the approach among British decision makers and British politicians. They demanded the mandate because of one reason, the Suez Canal. They had no intention whatsoever to keep what the world was asking them to do, and that's to help the Jews build the homeland. And the way to do that is by completely changing the demographics. Here is a statement made by an Arab leader a little later on. And just to show you one or two, Anthony Eden, a prominent politician, prime minister, Neville Chamberlain, that you all know the name, peace in our times, etc. That would represent Great Britain's policy. It was still dealt behind closed doors. It wasn't clear that this will be it, but it surfaced very quickly. Once you start limiting the number of Jews that come to Palestine, this will be violation number one. Once you're inviting Arabs from all around the area to come and help to build the British infrastructure, violation number two. So the way to accomplish that was by simply changing demographics in Palestine, and that was easy to do. 1925, the British complete the railroad that connected Egypt with Palestine. You can get on a train in Alexandria, and you're going all the way to Rafah, which is by Gaza, mandatory territory. Nobody will stop you. You don't have to present any documents. You don't need to identify yourself anywhere. And keep in mind that there are rumors that life is good in Palestine. The British are building their infrastructure. They need people. And the British will not hire the Jews because Jews demand better salaries and Jews demand to be treated equally. They will prefer always to hire Arabs. They will pay less and they will change the demographics so the Jews can no longer say that Palestine is theirs because such a big majority of Arabs. It's not fair. It's just not fair that the Jews will have the upper hand in Palestine. All of the above is a violation of the mandate. The mandate said very clearly, Palestine is open for Jewish immigration and Jewish immigration only. If you don't carry documents and nobody asks you to identify yourself, there's no limit. We speak about hundreds of thousands of Arabs infiltrating Palestine from all around the area because Britain offered jobs, the Jews offered jobs as well. At the same time, you limit the immigration on the Jewish people. You do understand the demographics is going to completely change in favor of the Arabs, obviously. The riots in Palestine started right away. The Paris Peace Conference was still going on. And since we speak about religion, Temple Mount will be now the focal point. It's so easy to get people together, even today, by the way. Today, when you have an Arab Muslim Israeli politician that wants to score more points and have more votes in the elections, all you have to say, the Temple Mount is in danger. That's it. Nothing more. This sentence will instigate all the masses. You don't have to prove anything. It doesn't matter that the Jews are protecting the Muslim holy sites and respecting them. You just have to say Temple Mount is in danger today. Not the Palestinian existence. Temple Mount, religion, religion, religion. So Temple Mount will become the focal point of the religious struggle. And as I said yesterday, Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran, not even once. For the second time, this session, I'm sorry, I hope that you're not recording this part of the whole thing. Meanwhile, the Zionist Congress gets together, and that's the statement delivered by the Jews. Yes, we have the priority in Palestine, but we're not coming on anybody's expense. We're not coming to take, to rob, to plunder. We are coming back home and we are offering an invitation to everybody, come and be part of us. You can be equal citizens and live with us in the country that we are going to build. So at the same time, you see the different approach of people to what was going on. And yes, I cannot be completely objective. That's why I prefer to rely on those documents. You're most welcome to see. Meanwhile, Great Britain, to try to compensate the Arabs once again, comes to the conclusion, well, if the world wants us to prepare the locals for self-government and state, we need also to teach the local Arabs in Palestine. No, you don't. The mandate says very clearly, Palestine for the Jews. But Great Britain said, okay, we don't want to cause trouble. Let's create a body of people for the local Arabs. So it will be a counterweight to the Zionist organization. So the Jews are represented by Zionism, and who will represent the Arabs? What kind of an institution we're going to build? They call a man by the name of Amin al-Husseini the term Hajj. Hajj is a title given to every Muslim that fulfilled the commandment to go to Mecca as a pilgrim. Every Muslim has to once in a lifetime, and once you did, you get the title Hajj. Simply means you completed your pilgrimage, all right? And Hajj Amin al-Husseini is not a politician. We speak about an imam. And the British are forming not the National Palestinian Movement, the Supreme Muslim Council. So now all the Arabs in Israel are united under one religious authority, and this man will lead all the struggle. He was kicked out by the British twice because he led struggle against the British as well, but he will be the most prominent leader on the Muslim Arab side in Palestine to lead the country to chaos after chaos. The Arabs understood very clearly, terror works. Each time our demands are not met, we're going to attack a Jewish community. The Jews will retaliate. Great Britain will say, okay, we need to please the Arabs. They will call a conference, we'll get more, and they were right. As I said yesterday, hard to admit, terror works. It takes some real courage to try to fight terror. And right now, the only country in the world who does that is Israel. Because enough is enough. Terror should not be rewarded. You should not be able to accomplish anything if you use violence. But that's the nature of the tribes in the Middle East. That's how they did all the time. There was a problem, we're not negotiating. We're going to kill each other. Well, they tried to use that on the British, and it works. So Great Britain, to try to please the Arabs, each time it happens, will always have a conference, will always bring over some politicians to check and see what's going on, and always in the favor of the local Arabs, I have to say. Just the career of Mr. Husseini, he became a strong friend of Adolf Hitler. He was invited to Berlin during WW2. He was broadcasting on German radio every day, calling all the Arabs in the world to kill Jews wherever you find them. So that's a man who is going to represent the Arabs in Palestine vis-a-vis the British and also vis-a-vis the Zionist organization. You know what? We can say now that a nation was born. It will be misusing the term. But in Palestine, there are two people fighting for the land. The Jews on one side and the Supreme Muslim Council on the other side. One speaks about a national home, one speaks about a religious victory. So there was no room for dialogue because the whole motivation was different. So once you understand that, just again to carry on with the career of Mr. Husseini, and I can show you, forgive me for this one, please read the following, all right? We speak about in the very beginning of the mandate. This man was tipped by a British colonel. Read it for yourself. It says basically, if you are going to lead an attack against the Jews, we will be able to show the world, Great Britain, that the Jews are not alone in Palestine, and the whole mandate, not a good idea, we want to support the Arabs. It says it very clearly, right? That will be now the policy and the approach of Great Britain. Couple of last slides with your permission before we break. Great Britain had basically one main reason why they wanted the mandate over Palestine. We said it many times. It wasn't to keep the white paper or the mandatory plan. It was to protect the Suez Canal and to be the first ones to bring oil from Iraq to to the brand new refineries that were built in Haifa, because that will be now the most important asset of Great Britain in the region. So they didn't care much about the whole mandate issue. They cared more about British policy that was contradicting necessarily the whole idea of a mandate. This is the list of British interests in the Middle East. So you try, as a Jewish person back in the days, you're an optimist, you have to be. It's going to work. The whole world gave recognition. Britain is only a servant to carry out the plan, and very quickly you begin to understand it's not going to happen. Great Britain had no intention to keep the mandate, and then the mindset among the Jews had to change as well. So, just to summarize everything, since the Jews were more affluent, obviously, and somebody has to pay taxes in Palestine, who do you think will pay most taxes in Palestine? Out of the local budget, the minority of the people was paying more than 60% of taxes. The British only collected 40% from the Arabs, twice as many in number, because the Jews were the richer community, obviously, and the money the Jews paid for the mandatory authorities was not invested in the Jewish area. We paid for the Muslim mosques and the first hospital. There were no hospitals in Palestine for the Arab population. There were none. And Great Britain will not invest anything. So who is going to pay for that infrastructure? The Jews. But it was okay, because the whole idea was we want to live together. If we can help in any way, all right, use our money to improve the infrastructure, that's what we want to accomplish. So Britain is collecting taxes from the Jewish population, and again, the Arab is the one to enjoy that. And meanwhile, in 1932, the Nazi Party, 1933, is taking over in Germany, and Western European Jews begin to understand that we have to flee, otherwise it may be too late, and they come over bringing money with them. Remember the Great Depression in America that all of your families went through if you lived here? The only economy in the world that was booming was in Palestine, because many wealthy German Jews fled from Germany. They brought money with them to build a country, basically. So if you hear in the stock market someplace that Palestine is a great place to invest, what do you think happens? You invest in Palestine. And who enjoys the investment? The Arabs. So this is frustrating, as you understand, but that will be the policy of the British Empire. I did show you this one, the words of David Ben-Gurion, that was back then the head of the Zionist organization. We want to purchase as much land as possible. We are not taking land from peasants. We are not forcing people to leave. We are going to buy land that nobody lives on. It is crucial to understand that, because the main accusation against us is that the Jews came to steal the land from the poor Palestinians. That's the British mandate. Nobody steals nothing from anybody. There was law and order. Everything was done by a certain set of rules and regulations, and Britain tries to limit it to the maximum. That will be the main effort, how to try to get more land. I do need to show you some of the data. Okay, I know it's a lot of information, but I do have a point. Jewish population increased in between the two wars. That will be the figure. It was supposed to be 3 times more if Britain had really kept its promise. Look at the numbers of the Arabs. These are just those that came in legally. But the true number of people coming in was about 3 times more, because most people entered Palestine as illegal workers, as seasonal workers. But that will be the number of people. For example, look at the city of Haifa. You see the increase in population over there? What would be the reason? Well, a harbor that Great Britain was building for the British Navy. There was no deep water harbor in Israel until then. And that attracts many people to come and work. And Great Britain imported from Egypt tens of thousands of people to help in the construction, and they were permitted to stay. These are the indigenous people of the land. These are the Palestinian nation. All these workers that Great Britain brought in order to build the infrastructure. Jerusalem, the population is increasing very fast. That's not biology. That's not natural growth. We speak about bringing over people to work, and of course a lot of illegal infiltration. I do want to show you this one as well. While in Haifa, the population increased in close to 300%, in the exclusively Arab towns, it wasn't growing that fast because there was nothing to do there. That will be the natural growth. Why would anybody go to Nablus? What's in Nablus? Basically, nothing. So the attraction of those infiltrators was to go to the Jewish towns, to go to the Jewish farmland. That's where the opportunities were. Nope, I'm going to skip this one with your permission because I'm looking at the clock. It's 9:55, and let's break for a few minutes. And once again, if anybody wants to check the resources table, by all means, and let's be back in 10 minutes. Is that okay? I promise to finish up the British mandate by the end of this morning. And tomorrow we'll speak about the state of Israel and the full confrontation between Palestinians and Jews in the land. All right, please be back in 10:05, and keep in mind, the bus leaves on time. Thank you. Thank you. Please, come back and have your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, even the British understood that the way that the government carries out the mandate is wrong. So they sent their own inquiry committee that produces a document, basically lecturing the mandatory authorities, you're wrong. That was not the reason why we got the mandate from the League of Nations, and you better correct your ways because the world is watching. We need to keep our reputation. We're supposed to give priority to the Jews. It worked for a while. We speak about 1930. The letter of MacDonald down below there was the one that has a new doctrine. Jews are free to come to Palestine. You do remember how the Arabs will respond to that. So before not too long, another wave of riots, and once again Britain has to limit the numbers of Jews. We speak about the 30s. Adolf Hitler is the Führer. It looks like another war is going to happen. Jews understand the problem. Many hesitate until the last minute. It will be too late to them. But with that letter, it looks like Great Britain is back on the right track. And Jews will be well received and well accommodated if they go to Palestine. It only lasted for a short while. And guess what was the response of the Arabs? Another wave of riots. But this time it wasn't just attacking Jewish communities, it was attacking the British forces in the country, and that will be a totally different scenario. I was able to find a short video from 1928, the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Some of you have been to Israel, and you've been to the Western Wall. That will be now the focal point of all the tension. As we said, the focus was on religion. Jews had access to the Western Wall, but every now and then the Arab kids will come to throw stones at them and to pee on the wall, etc., just to create more tension and just to create more unrest. So the Western Wall is one of the key points. Read the words of the French governor of the Golan Heights, the Khoran, reporting that in only one summer, one season, the French mandate in Syria could count between 30 to 36,000 people infiltrating into Palestine in 1 month, in 1 year, never to come back. So they were allowed in by the British, and keep in mind, France and Britain are not good friends. Whatever France can do to increase instability in British territory, they will be more than welcome to do and more than happy to do. So the French mandate has an interest to destabilize Palestine because of the canal, because of petrol. We speak about hundreds of thousands of illegal workers infiltrating into Palestine that just one summer, you see the numbers over there. So that will lead, of course, to a total chaos in the country. And I would like to go down this way. All right? If you can read what it says over there. The main claim of the Arabs is the land is saturated, there is no more room, the land is exhausted, every Jew who is going to come will be on the expense of an Arab, which means Arabs will be discriminated, they will lose their jobs, there is no more room for Jews to come to Palestine. Well, that will be a little more accurate, as you understand. There was plenty of room. Had Britain wanted to keep its promise, room was not a problem. By the way, today we have 10 million people live in Israel, and there's still plenty of room. We aspire to bring all the Jews back home. We did not accomplish that yet. About 49% of the world Jewish population lives in Israel, only 49. The biggest Jewish city in the world is not Jerusalem, but Brooklyn. All right, so we are working on it. So to say there's no room, there's plenty of room, and especially if you know how to improve the conditions and how to make space for more people to come. In 1936, the Arabs, led by the Mufti, come to the conclusion that if you're not going to rebel against the British, more Jews will come in and we're going to lose the struggle over Palestine. So they open an open rebellion against the British forces that will be led by the Grand Mufti, as you understand, but he was not alone. A lot of criminals, simple criminals wanted by the authorities in Syria are infiltrating into Palestine. They increase chaos within the Arab society. In fact, this war started as a Muslim struggle against the British, but very quickly turned into a civil war. More people were killed by the Arab gangs than by the British army, suppressing the revolt. But Palestine's demographics is changing constantly in favor of the Arabs. And since this was something of a different nature, and the Arabs are fighting for their right in the land, just to show you, forget about reading everything, just some images, the British understand that we need to respond in another way. And since Great Britain is exhausted already, and another war is around the corner, they need somebody to help them suppress the Arab revolt. Who would be a potential ally? The Jews. For the first time, Great Britain is assisting the Jews in Palestine against the Arabs. In what way, for example? They decided to train the members of the Jewish militia called the Haganah, that was founded in 1920, equip them with weapons, teaching them how to do battle, basically, because until then, when the Arabs were attacking Jewish communities, Jews were defenseless. We had to wait for the British to come to the rescue, and why would the British come to the rescue? So now Britain thinks that, okay, we need allies, let's take the Jewish side, at least for a while, so they can help us to suppress that revolt. And keep in mind, in 1936, Great Britain's attention is Europe and Germany, and not that much what happens in Palestine. So this war is going on and on for 3 years almost. The Arab population increases because of this infiltration, and Great Britain is asking the Jews to help, and these were good times, so to speak, for the Jewish communities in Palestine. Many people come from Western Europe, land is purchased, more communities are being built by the Jewish money. Even the harbor of Tel Aviv was founded because until then, all the produce used to go to Europe through the harbor of Jaffa. Jaffa is an Arab city. The harbor cannot be used anymore. So the Jews built a harbor in Tel Aviv, and that will be the main port of export. Some of you are old enough to remember Jaffa oranges, maybe? Years and years ago, that was the pride of the country, exporting citrus under the brand name Jaffa oranges. It all came out through the Tel Aviv harbor over there. So the disaster of the Arabs was basically a blessing, if you wish, for the Jewish population in Palestine, at least for a while. And we took full advantage of it, because the way the British responded to the Arab uprising was brutal. After 3 years of war, about 5,000 Arabs were killed either by the British or in this gang war among those gangs in the country. The Jewish people lost some people, but besides that, the backbone of the Arabs was crushed. In about 10 years, when there will be a proclamation of a Jewish state, and there will be another war, the Arabs will not have not the manpower, not the will, and not the knowledge how to win such a war because of this event. So the great Arab revolt They did not accomplish their goal. Well, they did, in a way, but that will be something that will lead to their disaster, followed by a bigger disaster in the war of 1948, 1949. And meanwhile, since Great Britain understood there was a problem, they sent a commission, as always, and this time, this will be led, I'm sorry, ran this one through as well, by a British Lord. Lord Peel was his name, Robert Peel, and he is coming to see what went wrong. How come Great Britain led to such a chaos in an issue that looked very simple to handle? The land is yours, seal the borders, don't let any illegal infiltration to go in, open the borders for the Jews as you were commanded. How did you mess up such a simple issue? So they come to check the possibilities, and after a few weeks in the country, meeting with the Jewish leaders, a meeting with Arab leaders, they come to the conclusion that the only way to try to solve peacefully the issue in Palestine is by partition. They're going to take this land called Palestine and divide it into two national homes. One for the Jews, look how small that is, the blue area, and one for the Arabs. That will be the plan of the Peel Commission. I think it does say that over there. Anyhow, the blue area will be Jewish, and the kind of red brownish area will be Arab. You do understand the issue here. First, Britain offered Palestine, quite a vast area. Then they took 75% away, leaving this. And now from these leftovers to give us such a small piece of land over there, without having Jerusalem. It's all about Jerusalem. You cannot have a Jewish nation living in Israel without Jerusalem as capital. So that's the new position, that's the agenda on the table. They speak about partition, basically, and they were not alone. There were some precedents around the world of separating populations that cannot live together. Turkey and Greece exchange populations because when you have a minority that lives in a country majority, expect civil wars, problems, unrest. It happened everywhere. India and Pakistan, Turkey and Greece. So this exchange of populations or try to separate people was the mindset of the world between the two world wars. And they were right in a way. You try to minimize the friction, minimize the problems if possible. That's the plan on the table. Guess what happened? One party was willing to consider that, and that was the Jewish party. Although this was not enough, whatever the world is willing to offer as a state, we'll take it. What do you think was the response of the local Arabs? No way. This land is Muslim, the Jews have no right in it whatsoever. They even refuse to participate in the peace talk, so to speak, or to give or claim their arguments to the committee. So the committee is spending time, they did a good job by the way, write the whole history about Jewish presence in the land, etc. And the bottom line would be this. Please read what is highlighted in yellow over there. Makes sense. Two societies so different. And forget about this one progressive, one more. It doesn't matter. These two cannot coexist. So if the British mandate continues as it is, and this is a given situation, it's going to lead to more bloodshed. It's going to lead to more violence. The only way to stop that, admitting our failure, we failed to do that basically, is to terminate the mandate and create two countries. One for the Jews, one for the Arabs. It's the first time that the issue of partition in Palestine was on the table. Fortunately, the Arabs also rejected it, so it never came to be. But that was the idea, as small as the land was, and it goes into details, lots of details. For example, the Jews were permitted to export our produce from here to the harbor of Eilat, and the Arabs could export the produce from here to the harbor of Haifa. So there will be some kind of economic unity, economic cooperation, one coin, one currency. And they also said that the Arab state should be part of the state of Jordan, which means a confederation. A Palestine, for the lack of a better term, for the Arabs, which is part of the Jordanian kingdom. That was the plan, rejected by the Arabs, and in a way also by the Jews, but at least when the committee was in the country during the war, during the revolt, all the violence in Israel kind of stopped down for a few weeks to let them do the jobs. But after they left, all hell broke loose once again. And that's what led to almost the complete demise of the Arab gangs and the Arab militias in the country. But then they understood how it works, all right? Britain wants to please, Britain needs an ally. The war is inevitable. We're going to fight the Germans. We need allies. We cannot count on the Jews, the small number of people. We want the Muslim world on our side. Only way to do that is once again to turn against the Jews in Palestine. And in 1939, the 17th of May, Colonial Secretary Malcolm MacDonald is issuing another statement of policy. It was called the White Paper because the cover is white. That would be the name of his policy. And it says very clearly, to use his words, Balfour had to be an idiot. He didn't say idiot. How come 20 years earlier he did not understand what was going on? Because 20 years earlier, Palestine was not crowded with illegal workers that came because of British policy. When Balfour wrote his document, it was doable. By now, but there are so many Arabs in the area, how can we accomplish Balfour's plan? In only 20 years, they messed up the whole thing. So now that's new policy, because they knew for certain in the future war, the Jews will not support the Germans. They are, for granted, our allies. The question is, Arabs, we want them on our side. And that's one way to try to have them on our side in the future war against Germany. And this document looks very promising to the Arab side, right? They will decide how many Jews will be allowed in. Folks, 1939, the war is about to begin. Jews have no escape from Europe. People will die. We're going to lose 6 million people who perish from my people. And Great Britain at least has some responsibility. Because even those that wanted to leave Germany, and to be honest with you, for the first years, Germany had an interest to get rid of the Jews. Extermination was not the policy until 1942. But who will take them? Nobody. The world had a conference in Amiens in France in 1938 discussing Jewish refugees from Europe. No country in the world, I'm sorry to say, not even the USA, was willing to open the gates. Interesting. Today, the Palestinians have the same issue. Nobody in the world is willing to take Palestinians in. Nobody. Especially not Arab countries. I'm not comparing the two situations. I'm just speaking about like an anecdote which is interesting to know. By the way, the Dominican Republic was the only one who was willing to accommodate few thousands of Jews. So even if there was a way to flee Germany, even if there was a way to save people's lives, the only option was Palestine. Great Britain said no. The borders are closed, and some people that managed to get on ships and boats and try to break through that blockade were stopped by the British Navy and were sent to Cyprus detention camps. That will be now a new situation. Great Britain is officially pulling back from the mandate, from the Balfour Declaration. It's a new story. The war is about to begin. During WW2, not much happened in Palestine, I'll be quick to admit, because the world was busy with the war. By the way, remember the French mandate over Syria and Lebanon? Well, France was conquered by the Germans, very quickly, by the way. What will happen to the French colonies? They are not occupied by the Germans. Are they going to be loyal to free France under Charles de Gaulle? Or maybe they're going to yield, they're going to succumb to the authorities and they'll be Nazi collaborators? They had a choice. The French colonies had a choice, and they chose. They chose to follow Nazi Germany, which means that on the borders of Palestine now, it's not just the French mandate, it's a hostile territory, which is in a way controlled by Nazi Germany. I'll say it once again. The French colonies had a choice. Each colony had its own governor, its own police, military force. They did not have to follow the central government to say, okay, we're going to obey Mr. Hitler. And they choose. And they choose to follow the French doctrine and to be, in a way, collaborating with the Nazi authorities. You need to understand that from France proper, most of the Jews that were killed It wasn't the German police, the Gestapo, that went to look for them. It was the French authorities, without any hesitation, to load them on trucks and trains and send them to the death. So the issue that we have even today is not just Nazi Germany. Too many collaborators. We go easy on Anne Frank and on the Dutch because of Anne Frank. Listen, before the German army even crossed the border into Holland, the Dutch police started gathering Jews in the streets of Amsterdam before they were even started, because they understood that that's the will of the new masters-to-be. There was a place to go to. The place was Palestine. Now, because of the white paper, Great Britain is keeping its policy, and it's not really an option. During WW2, I would say that not much happened in Palestine, but meanwhile, the Grand Mufti is invited to Berlin, obviously, and he's calling all the Arab world to support Nazi Germany. What a disappointment to Britain. Britain was counting that the Arabs are going to assist them in the war against Germany, and that's what they get in return. So the whole idea of betraying the Jews was in vain. If you want to get the Arab support, you don't get it. And that will be the approach of the Arab population, or the Arabs, vis-a-vis Nazi Germany. By the way, the Mufti even went to Bosnia. Bosnia is a Muslim country. All right, tried to encourage the local youngsters to create brigades to join the German army. It was a partial success, but you do understand the idea of the Arabs. We support the Germans, we have the same goal, to get rid of the Jews, either in Arab countries all around the world. So the Arabs are taking the German side, obviously. 40,000 Jews who live in Palestine volunteer to the British army. It was more important to defeat the Germans, all right, than to fight against the British, at least for now. But the mindset is shifting. The Arabs are not our existential problem, it's Great Britain. Great Britain is no longer supporting the existence of a Jewish state, but that will have to wait until the war is over. So during the years of WW2, Palestine is relatively quiet. And again, the Jews are assisting Britain, and that will be a blessing because during serving the British army, people will have the experience, will have a chain of command, will know how to do battle. Coming back home after the war is over, the Jewish part in Palestine is prepared. There is an army, a militia, well equipped, well motivated, having combat experience, something that the locals did not have. So although we were outnumbered in Palestine, we had an advantage. The advantage was motivation, national vision, and the experience that we've gained during the Second World War serving in the British Army. By the way, many Jewish units disobeyed British commanders' commands because part of the plan was to try to go into the death camps as quickly as possible to rescue Jews, even violating orders given by the British forces. So that was the plan, basically, of most of the Jewish presence in Europe under the British Army. It wasn't really working that well. That was the plan. I do want to skip this one with your permission, all right? You know what? Why? Looks like interesting. I need the volume all the way down because in Hebrew, I doubt how many people can speak Hebrew in the house. No. Okay. During the war, what we try to do is to rescue as many Jews as possible. Romania, for example, was liberated in 1944, and people started making their way to the shores of Romania, getting on boats that were purchased by Jewish money to bring them over to Palestine in terrible conditions. It wasn't a luxury boat, and it wasn't a love boat, but people were just surviving the German Holocaust, and they wanted to go back to Palestine. That was the only effort that we could do, except for volunteering to the British Army, bringing people over. And those that did break through that blockade of the British, once they landed on the shores, were arrested and were sent to detention camps in Cyprus. So some of those survived the concentration camps to be sent to another concentration camp. It wasn't concentration, really, detention camp. And they stayed there until the state was born, basically, but that was the only thing we could do. So you do see the British kind of taking over the boat. We call it the clandestine. Is that a good word in English? Clandestine immigration? Clandestine, okay? Wasn't very successful. Most people didn't make it. Most people, some drowned in the sea, torpedoed by British submarines, etc. So this is one of the chapters that we call in my country heroic chapters of trying to rescue and save as many people as possible to bring them over to the homeland. Well, let's make some progress here. In May of 1941, the Mufti issued a fatwa, which means a religious order that the Arab world is at war against the Germans. He was hoping to recruit more people to join the Nazi German army, but that was not really a big success. But that teaches you something about the approach of the Arabs in Palestine. And of course, after the war will be over, what will happen? And since there was a need of workers in Palestine, once again, you bring people over from Egypt and from Afghanistan and all around the region just to help the British Army. And one reason they would come is not just you're going to have a job, you can stay. So once again, the whole demographics. So speaking about the Palestinian nation, speaking about the indigenous people of the land, these are the people who are the Palestinian nation and the indigenous people of Palestine. The war came to an end, and the Jewish authorities begin to understand that as long as Great Britain is in the country, we'll never have our independence. Because until then, we trusted the British. They have their interests, but it's going to one direction. Great Britain is going to help us. And therefore, we have an issue with the Arabs to try to protect our lives. But after the MacDonald White Paper that said officially in 1939, Great Britain is not committed anymore and not supporting the Jews, the Jewish leadership understood we need to fight against the British because as long as they are here, we will not live to see our independence. And for a few years, there was a brutal struggle of the Jewish militia, the Haganah, attacking British targets, not civilians. There are no civilians in the country, just British military personnel. Breaking through prisons to free, if possible, Jewish prisoners. Some of you may have seen a movie called Exodus with Paul Newman many, many years ago. Anybody? Speaks about those years. I can recommend to watch the movie. It's a movie, but it's a good one. And by the way, a book, if you're interested in more of this, it's called Oh, Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem. Dominique Lapierre, Larry Collins, that speaks about that very same era, those years that you see over there. And Great Britain simply had enough. In February 19th of 1947, the British are informing the United Nations, just born in San Francisco, April 1st of 1945, we don't know what to do with Palestine. We are going home, you deal with Palestine. Great Britain won the war. Great Britain lost the empire. In a very short time, they have to withdraw from India, from Sri Lanka, or Ceylon, that was the name, and Palestine. They've invested 100,000 troops in Palestine. The expense was enormous. The British Treasury cannot afford to have those colonies anymore. Britain is collapsing as an empire, and part of the outcomes of the war is, let's go back home and leave Palestine to do whatever people want to do there. But it still had a little problem with conscience maybe. Well, maybe the UN can find a solution. You read those documents and it makes you smile, a bitter smile. The real intent was, we'll tell the world how complicated is the mess in Palestine, so maybe they'll say, stay a little longer, try to solve the problem. That was the idea. But the United Nations was more clever. They decided to deal with this hot potato by sending over a committee. 11 members. It will be called UNSCOP, the United Nations, something, Palestine over there. And these members of committee having the mindset of partition that was brought up about 10 years earlier. They come over and they're on a mission. They're going to meet with Jewish leaders. They're going to meet with Arab leaders. I have to say that the world's sympathy after the Holocaust was with the Jews. Many people say that because of the Holocaust, the Jews have a country. No, the country was ready to be proclaimed before the war started. with institutions, with a provisional government, with courthouses. Everything was ready. It is true that the world's sympathy was now willing to consider and give the Jews a homeland by the UN resolution. That will be correct to say. So these members of the team are meeting with leaders. As always, the Arabs refuse to appear. So they only speak to the Jewish delegation. They travel around the country, and in the Arab towns and communities, the kids were instructed, when you see them coming, there's this fancy car, just one car, okay? You start throwing dirty diapers on the car and rotten tomatoes. That's how we welcome the United Nations. Doesn't leave a good impression, right? So the Arabs refused to come and to the table because their view was one. There will never be a Jewish state in Palestine. The place is Muslim. These are dhimmis. They are strangers. They should be our slaves. We are not negotiating about anything. And the UN committee, with much frustration, had to admit that they did not have a chance to listen to both sides of the conflict. They only heard the Jewish side, but the Arab side simply refused to appear and come to the table. So, a new plan, partition. They finish the visit and they go back home to the United Nations headquarters. I'm going to run this one through, and they have a new plan. I'm taking a side track, which is important, and you know what to do when I do this. So once again, I'm apologizing. Thank you. I was able to bribe the friends at the booth, so when they see me, they just mute me. It may look irrelevant, but I do want to say a word about that. All right? I'm not sure how good is your Latin. Uti possidetis juris. That's how good is my Latin, just reading the English characters over there. It's important because there was a precedent to that. It's an international law idea, which goes back to the Roman Empire, by the way, that says the following. If a mandate came to an end and a new nation was proclaimed to be independent, the land of the previous mandatory authorities is automatically the land of the nation that was born. Okay? Which means once Great Britain is leaving the area and the Jewish state is created because the Arabs refused to even negotiate, the borders of the Jewish state are the borders of the mandatory property, which means this. It won't be the end of it. And people speak about occupied territories and speak about occupation of the West Bank. The West Bank is within this map. So according to this principle, the mandate came to an end, one state is born, the land of the mandate is the land of the state. This principle was implemented in Asia, in some places in Africa, when the French mandate came to an end, in Congos and others. Whatever were the lines of the previous mandate are the lines of the new state that was born. So at least by this juris, the land is Jewish. But the petition plan that was presented by the United Nations Committee spoke about this. So we'll take the land of Palestine and divide it to two national entities. There will be a homeland for the Jewish people marked in red. All this is desert, by the way. There will be a homeland for the local Arabs. Let's call them Palestinians for the lack of a better term, okay? There will be a Palestine for the local Arabs. Jerusalem will be an international city that will be dominated by a United Nations tribunal, including Bethlehem. It's an enclave, including Jerusalem and Bethlehem, which is only 5 miles south to Jerusalem, someplace around here. That's the plan. As always, one party will accept it and the other party will reject it. For the Jewish mindset, after the Holocaust, whatever the world was willing to offer, we were in no position to say no. So obviously the Jewish party we said, we'll take it. We need a place. We want to bring over survivors of the Holocaust. Whatever you offer, we'll take. The Arab answer was, as you know all too well, no. The Jews have no rights in this country. The Jews are dhimmis, are slaves. We are not talking about any partition, any Jewish national state, absolutely nothing. This will not happen. And meanwhile, I didn't speak about it earlier, but Arab countries in the area are being born. In 1943, Lebanon was established by the French. In 1946, Syria was born as an independent nation. In 1946, the Hashemite key to Transjordan. In 1923, Saudi Arabia. So now there are Arab countries around Israel that have the same message. If Israel will be declared as a state, it's not just the local Palestinian problem. It's our problem. We will come to make sure that the Jews are in the ocean. So it's not just a limited issue of the people that fight for the land. It's the whole Arab world around Israel that has the same idea. The Jewish state will never born. It is Arab land, and the Jews have no rights in it. So the UN is voting for it. I'm going to run this one through with your permission. And here is, for example, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan el-Banna, a man who wrote a book a year after Mein Kampf was published, Hitler's book. And his book is almost like Mein Kampf in Arabic. Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood, all right? We'll get to that in a day or two. That will be it. We have many Jews that live in Arab countries. If you dare to proclaim a state, we are going to kill all the Jews in our lands. So it's not just Palestine, it's the whole Arab world around Palestine, because more than 1 million Jews live in Arab countries. And in some places, they are the indigenous people. Jews lived in Baghdad, or not Baghdad, Iraq, from the days of Ezekiel. That's long before Islam, that's long before Iraq, and now their lives are in danger because of the Jewish state that will be proclaimed. All the Jews in Muslim countries, not only dhimmis, we're going to kill them. It's a threat that you have to consider. Do you want to proclaim your state knowing that 1 million of your brothers and sisters, after losing 6 million, their lives will be in danger? It was something for the Israeli leadership to consider. Do we want to proclaim our state knowing that these might be the results of it? Plus a full-scale invasion of Arab armies into Israel's territory. November 29th, 1947, the United Nations is in session. They bring Resolution 181, also known as the Partition Plan, and the world is voting. Let me show you this, quite moving for us Israelis. I need the volume, please.
Egypt, no. Soviet Union, yes. United Kingdom, abstain. The United States, yes. Yugoslavia, abstain.
Resolution of the Dutch Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstentions.
You see celebrations in the streets of Tel Aviv. Every kid in Israel knows these pictures. I only had one radio maybe in a house, and everybody was with their ears to the radio to hear the broadcast from New York. Well, hallelujah. There was a UN resolution, and this resolution speaks very clearly about two states, remember? One for the Jews and one for the Arabs. The problem is that the title resolution is only given to a decision that everybody agreed upon. In this case, the Arabs rejected the whole idea. So officially, it was not a resolution, it was a decision made by the UN that nobody was obligated in a way to follow because the Arabs rejected it to begin with. I know it sounds like technicalities, but it's not. Because today, world powers are basing their claim on old documents, and was it a resolution, or was it just a little... It's quite insane. Let me give an example, okay? When the UN publishes a certain decision document, it's being translated to several languages, 5, 6, maybe 7. Now, a translation cannot be identical from one language to the other. You do have some nuances, it's inevitable. So for example, when in 1967, we'll get to that tomorrow, the UN decided that Israel should withdraw from territories conquered in 1967, that would be the English version. The one in French said the territories. You think it's a nuance? Israel should withdraw from the territories, or Israel should withdraw from territories. You understand the difference here? All the territories or just territories? We go with the English version because it is on our favor. The whole Arab world is going with the French translation because it is on their favor. So these words do matter because countries are conducting their affairs based on precedents, international documents. So we speak about a decision but not a resolution officially because not everybody agreed that that should be the plan. So now we have a resolution or decision, 181, and the following day, what we will call the War of Israel's Independence begins. The Arabs will call it the disaster or the Nakba. So right after the proclamation was made that speaks about two states for two people, Israeli communities are being attacked by the Arab militias. What was left of them, because 10 years earlier, during the uprising against the British, they took a real hit. So the first part of the war and the first full confrontation between Jews and Arabs in the land, the Arab militias and the Jewish Haganah, is taking place in 1947. The British are still in the land. British mandate will terminate eventually in the 14th of May, 1948, Israel's days of independence. So the first part of the war, the British army is still deployed in Palestine. Since they know that they're about to go back home, they evacuate many of their positions. They focus on the strategic sites, Jerusalem, the harbor of Jaffa, the airport in Lydda, which is Ben Gurion Airport today. They want to control the roads, but they pull out from other strategic places, and in every single case, they call the local Arabs to occupy those strategic locations they've just left. So speaking about the fairness of the British regime. So step number one will be a war between the Jews and the local Arabs or Palestinians when Great Britain is still in the area. Here are the figures, here are the numbers. You do know who has the majority, and you do know how they got that majority, all this illegal infiltration into Palestine. Less Jews, obviously, more motivated, more organized. There was a national agenda, something that the Arabs in the land never had. And I will show you later on an Arab leader complaining bitterly. How can you ask people to fight for their nation when they do not understand the concept of being a nation? In other words, we had a big advantage, not by numbers, but by the training, organization, and motivation. So that's how the war begins, and for the first time ever, the Jewish forces are attacking Arab bases. That did not happen before. The Jewish forces would retaliate if the British would not come to their assistance. But now, it's a war. And now everybody is fighting everybody, but most of the war is taking place along the road, especially the road to Jerusalem. Let me show you this one. No volume, please, if possible. Jerusalem was surrounded by the Arab militias and the Jordanian army. Great Britain is still in the country. They make an exception and allow the Jordanian army to invade British sovereign territory to help the Arabs in the war against the Jews, and Jerusalem is put under siege. The city almost starved to death. There's only one very narrow road that connects Jerusalem and the rest of the country, and they send trucks, armored convoys filled with food all the way to Jerusalem. The city almost surrendered because of starvation. And the winter of 1948 was a freezing winter, and Jerusalem was in a major problem. Here is what I mentioned a minute ago, speaking about the Muslim activists complaining. Again, the lack of motivation among the Arabs. You're supposed to go and fight for a nation, but they do not understand the concept. So what will bring people together? That most of them, their parents came from a foreign land, they don't even belong here. Why will they fight for a land they feel no connection to? Because many of them, I'll say it again, maybe lived half a generation in Palestine, brought in by the British, but they would not give their lives for a place that wasn't really, they could go back home. Their home still existed. So why risk your life to fight for a country that you do not believe is really yours? And that's why he's complaining. We're going to lose that war because there's no commitment among the local Arabs to fight for the nation because it's not really a nation. It's not propaganda yet. I may get into that a little later on. All right, so these are the complaints from the Arab side about the poor way that the Arabs are responding. So stage number one, as I said, fighting on the roads, especially on Jerusalem. I do want to show you this one, if I may. See, that's the highway from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Today, it's a 6-lane road, right? You can drive 60, 70, 80 miles if the police doesn't stop you, which happens every now and then. That's how it used to look like. It's a very narrow road, goes into the hills, Arab communities on both sides, very easy to block. All you have to do is roll down some boulders, and that's it. Nothing crosses. You want to break through, you have to come prepared. You need to have armored vehicles because they are firing at you from both sides. The city is starving. That's the only way to save the city, by sending food. The British are not helping. The British are checking the convoys to make sure there are no weapons in them, just food and water. By the way, what saved Jerusalem in 1948 were the biblical water cisterns. Many of you have not been to Jerusalem, but those of you that have been, maybe you remember. The whole city has an underground city, all made of ancient cisterns that were carved out by the locals to collect rainwater. Jerusalem has one spring only. The city is absolutely dependent on collecting rainwater, and aqueducts did later on. What saved Jerusalem in 1948, people went back to the old cisterns to drink water from. All right, because it's still working, topography doesn't change. The water finds its way going down the hill into the ancient cisterns. So 1947-48 was crucial for Jerusalem. You see a convoy making its way, usually casualties along the way. And I have to take a sidetrack for just a minute. The accusation against Israel is ethnic cleansing. Many people will point at us to say that during the war of 1948, in many cases, you simply loaded people on trucks and you sent them away. I even heard somebody says you created a death march. All right? That's the accusation. To be honest with you, in some places, people were expelled by us. In most cases, they left on their own. I'll prove it to you in just a minute. But if you want to secure the road to Jerusalem, and you have villages on both sides of the road, and you know that each time a caravan goes through, once again the road will be blocked, the only way to secure the way is to take those villagers, load them on trucks, send them 10 miles away to another Arab town, destroy the village. I'll be quick to admit, in some places, when we had to, we did expel people by the hundreds, not by the hundreds of thousands. And some villages were destroyed by the state of Israel in the war of 1948. Would you like to compare that to the atrocities of the Second World War only 3 years earlier? There's no comparison. But you always isolate that tiny little thing. The Jews expelled, it happens everywhere, in much bigger figures. But always the finger is pointed at us, oh, you expelled? Yes, we did. If you present a threat to Jerusalem's safety, you get on the truck, we send you not to a foreign country. 5 miles away, there was a village, you have a cousin over there, go and live with him. Same language, same food, same everything. It wasn't displacing people to a foreign country. 5 miles, 6 miles, we had to have a corridor to guarantee that the road to Jerusalem is safe. That's what happened in this case. See the map, Tel Aviv is here, and this is the main road, Highway 128, go to Jerusalem. They would always ambush the vehicles as they entered into the hilly area. These are the mountains of Judea. So you do see the Arab kind of irregulars or semi-regulars coming from the villages. Again, very poorly trained, very poorly commanded. But the masses are showing up, and then they go back home. So there's no discipline. There was no really an Arab army, which was a huge advantage for the Jewish side. So phase number one of the war will be the war for the roads. And let me show you this one as well. Volume. Snow in Jerusalem. Not very common. Happens every now and then. But this was one of the worst winters in the city ever. You do see they are giving out food and water in centers. Arab spies used to go to the streets of Jerusalem because the notice was over, the announcement, between 10 and 10:30 today we are going to give water, and they would give the location. All right, in the crossroads of King George Highway and Jaffa Road. And they will transmit that radio data to the artillery batteries of the Jordanian army outside Jerusalem, and they will open fire when people were waiting in line to get a cup of water. All right, so you do understand how big of that problem was. Well, this shows you, today we have a big monument on the road to Jerusalem, which is made of these old vehicles that we got together and we place it one next to the other. Today it's an memorial, and this police officer tells his story. He was one of those convoy guards or whatever. Again, this is not the point. All right, as I said, although the British are still in the country, they totally ignore an invasion of the Jordanian Legion. They totally ignore invasion of the Iraqi army into Israel's territory, because these guys come to assist the Arabs, and that was British interest. We still are in stage number 1 of the war. Very briefly about the end of it, but that will take me a minute because I'm watching the clock, and I do want to send you on your way at around 11. The British Empire, or mandatory Palestine, came to an end. On the 14th of May, 1948, Great Britain is going back home. By the time that the British are leaving the country, we dealt successfully, from our perspective, with the local Arab militias. The partition plan to divide the country into two. We were able to conquer more land that was allocated to the local Arabs. So the Jewish area is growing. The local Arab militias are devastated. They cannot defend themselves anymore. And now the Jewish side, not a state yet, is preparing to stop the invasion of the Arab armies. Now the big guys are coming. To deal with the local militias was not that much of a problem, to be honest with you. But to try to survive an assault of 7 regular Arab armies, fully equipped and motivated to kill all the Jews along the way, as they were stating, I'll show you in just a minute, that was phase number 2. So when the British mandate came to an end, State of Israel is proclaimed to be a state. It was Friday afternoon in Tel Aviv. It was interesting because Great Britain is preparing, let me show you this one. Ellen Cunningham, the last British commissioner, is about to embark the boat in Haifa to leave the country. As long as he's not on the boat, the mandate did not terminate, okay? Now it's Friday afternoon. The Shabbat is about to begin. The Sabbath is a big issue in Israel. The Israeli provisional government gets together in Tel Aviv, waiting to hear from Haifa on the phone that the governor got on his boat finally, so we can proclaim the state. And time goes by, the Sabbath is getting nearer and nearer, and the governor hesitates. Now in the 13 members of the provisional government, two were ultra-Orthodox Jews, and they said, we don't care about the country. When the Sabbath begins, we're not signing anything, we're going home. And they meant it. So think about this telephone line. All right, did he leave yet? Is he on the boat? Can we finally celebrate our independence? Last minute, Mr. Cunningham on the boat, phone was made. David Ben-Gurion is proclaiming the founding of the State of Israel just before the Sabbath began. So the 2 members were able to add a signature because they were the swing vote. Not everybody was for establishing a Jewish state. There were too many things to consider. Number 1, are we able to survive the invasion of 7 Arab armies? Number 2, what will happen to our Jewish brothers in Arab countries? 13 members, they voted. It was 6 to wait with the proclamation and 6 to proclaim. And Mr. Ben-Gurion was number 7. He said, listen, we have a chance here. We waited for 2,000 years for this moment. We do not know what may happen tomorrow. If we don't take it now, we may have to wait for a long time. So he had his signature, and the state was born Friday afternoon of 1948. Let me show that to you. I want to go through all this one because we spoke about it. I told you, not a very disciplined speaker.
זוהי זכותו הטבעית של העם היהודי להיות ככל עם ועם עומד ברשות עצמו.
Reading the Proclamation of Independence, I'll show you 2 paragraphs in just a minute.
תפתח לרווחה את שערי המולדת לכל יהודי, ותעניק לעם היהודי מעמד של אומה שוות זכויות בסוף העמים. לפיכך נתכנסנו, אנו חברי מועצת העם.
Your kids went to school, we had to memorize some of this proclamation by we don't have a constitution, but this will be the document, all right, that in a way is replacing a constitution. It's like a declaration of principles, how we want to see the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Thousands of people are listening, of course, and as he was reading, the Egyptian Air Force was bombing the building. So chapter number 2 of the war just started, and please read only 2 paragraphs from the Proclamation of Independence. That's what the Jewish state is going to be all about. That will be the plan. We don't want to take from anybody nothing. We offer equal opportunity. Anybody who lives in Israel, including Arabs and Jews and Buddhists and Christians and you name it, are invited to be part of the rebirth of a nation, to be equals and have equal rights as it is in Israel until this very day. So we'll stop now because it was a happy celebration. The Jewish state was born. By the way, what about the Arab state? The UN said clearly, 2 states for 2 people. 1 for the Jews, 1 for the Arabs. How come there was no Arab state? If you do not know your history, forgive me for saying that, and I would ask you, what about the Arab state? Your answer will be, you, the Jews, conquered their land, obviously, and that's why there is no Palestinian state. You're wrong. You're dead wrong. I'll prove you that to you tomorrow morning. What happened to the proposed Palestinian state? Thank you, folks. It's 11:03. Okay, so I owe you 3 minutes plus 6 from yesterday. I owe you 9 minutes total. Thank you for coming. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.